Hello, welcome to the SCP podcast. SCP is Society for Consulting Psychology. I'm the host for today, Joanie Connell, and my special guest is Dr. Ryne Sherman. Ryne is the Chief Science Officer at Hogan Assessment Systems, and he's also the co-host of his another podcast, the Science of Personality podcast. So you can check him out online as well. So let's start and we'll say welcome, Ryne.
Well, thanks so much, Joni, for having me here today. Real pleasure to speak with you and to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence today. Very exciting.
Oh, I'm excited for sure. I do a lot with AI, and I know you're doing some at Hogan as well. So, well, let's start out first, though, just understanding a little bit about what your role is. I mean, why will you talk to us about AI? Is that something you do at Hogan?
Yeah, sure. So at Hogan, as you mentioned, my role is the chief science officer. So Hogan's is a company that's grounded in science. Our founders, Bob Hogan, Joyce Hogan, both scientists, both studying personality psychology, personality science. And that's what our company is really all about. It's about taking personality science and delivering it to organizations, companies all over the world to help them make better decisions about their people, to help them grow people, to develop people, to coach people in the right ways. And we know that with real high quality personality assessments, you can do that. So in my role, I run our scientific side of our operation. There's about 12 PhD IO psychologists who work on my team
Wow.
that are constantly working to improve our assessments, constantly looking to build better norms, ways that we can just continue to increase the quality of our assessments and that entire process.
Wow, that's a lot of PhDs. That's great. Glad
We've
to
got a
know.
lot of brain power firing around
Yeah,
here for sure.
yeah. Well, let's start out by we want to talk about AI today, but let's figure out how to define it. So how do you define it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really important question. It sounds like a really simple sort of softball kind of thing, but it turns out it's actually, I think, pretty impactful for um, for any kind of discussion around AI, and
Mhm.
I think it's really impactful for policy makers out there too, because there are a lot of definitions of AI that, if you really
Mhm.
look, they start talking about things like anything that uses a computer to sort of help with the decision. Well, geez, by some of these definitions of AI, that would include things like Microsoft Excel
Yeah.
would be considered AI, depending on what policies you're reading, what kind of proposals you're seeing, and these are real legal proposals that are being put out in states and territories all over the world. So I think it's really critical that we get the definition of artificial intelligence right. For me, artificial intelligence is any sort of um, computer process that tries to simulate historic human like processes that we've historically thought of as
Mhm.
human. So that includes things like synthesizing information, summarizing information, trying to make inferences from information, things that we've typically thought only humans could do this, right? Now, it's a little silly in some respects because, I don't know, 60, 80, hundreds of years ago, you might have said, well, a computer, that's, things that only humans can multiply large numbers and things like that. Well, then computers could do that, right? So in some respects, like that sort of bar keeps moving. But I think for today, and most people define, I think the most important definition of artificial intelligence today has to do with um, computers analyzing patterns of data, right? Looking at patterns of
Mhm.
data and synthesizing, summarizing that information in a way that typically we would only expect humans to be able to do.
Excellent. And so that would be in part for like decision making and calculating, well, even excelling humans in some of those, the speed and accuracy, but then also communicating with humans with the large language models like the Chat GPT.
Absolutely. So things like large
Mhm.
language models are clear examples. One of the examples I like to talk about, one of the early examples I like to talk about is actually from the world of chess. As an example called Alpha
Mhm.
Zero, which was one of the first artificial
Mhm.
intelligence built playing computer bots. And one of the reasons I think this was a real huge moment in history of artificial intelligence was, so for a really long time, humans, the top level humans, could always beat the computers at chess.
Mhm.
Computers didn't have the ability to evaluate positions very well. All they could see was material and decide that this is worth more than that, and then get checkmated, even though they were going for something else over here. So humans could beat. But then around about 2000 or so, the computers by pure calculation, just by purely being able to look 30, 40, 50 moves ahead and at rapid speeds could do better than humans. So suddenly the computers
Mhm.
could beat humans, and humans have never had any chance ever since. But a dramatic moment came when Alpha Zero was created, because Alpha Zero was not like those deep calculating computers. Alpha Zero learned to play chess by playing against itself millions of times. And it didn't calculate deeper than these other computers. It didn't even run on more high powered software than these other computers. What it did was it just had more like this human like intuition about which moves are good and which moves are bad, because it had played many times, millions of times against itself. And of course, when it first started playing, it did terrible things. It made really bad moves. But
Mhm.
over time, it learned which moves resulted in wins, what moves resulted in losses. And the amazing thing about it is it really couldn't tell you exactly why it would make certain moves it would make. It would make these moves, and all it could tell you was that it felt like this gave it a better chance of winning based on its experience. And it started beating badly these supercomputers, these really mega computers that could calculate much better. It was beating them and was playing in a much more human like way. Now, I will say that this had obvious advantages over a human. First of all, it could calculate faster than humans could, but also it had unlimited memory and could remember every game that it had ever played, which of course humans
Mhm.
can't do.
Interesting. Well, so now that we have this, and not only can it calculate more quickly and come up with decisions very accurately and communicate with humans and
Mhm.
learn, what are you doing with AI at Hogan Assessments?
Yeah. So you mentioned the large language models earlier,
Mhm,
and that was another
mhm,
obviously big moment in our
mhm,
already seeing, we're living it right now in AI history, was when Chat GPT sort of hit the public sphere. And so what these models can obviously do is they can do all kinds of things, like talk to you, communicate with you, write
mhm,
plays, write songs. You can have it do all kinds of things. You can again have it summarize information, write essays. This is a lot of concern among teachers and educators about how people are using these kinds of tools in the classroom. Um, but in the assessment world, the impact is there's a few really clear impacts. Number one
mhm,
is um, there's concern about, well, not necessarily concern, but one option is to use artificial intelligence systems to write items, right? So you can
mhm,
do this very easily. You could go to a system like ChatGPT, and there's others out there, by the way. There's Gemini, and there's Llama 3, which is a really powerful
mhm,
one that just got released by Meta right now. It's a kind of all the rage right now. But you can use these to do things like write me 10 items for an assessment on narcissism, and it has no problem. They'll write you 10 personality test items around narcissism, or
mhm,
you can just say, write me 10 things an ambitious person might agree with, and it'll write you 10 items. Now, is this the best psychometric assessment ever made? Probably not, but you can use this to draft items, to come up with new items, to brainstorm items. And I think that's sort of a hint at where we see artificial intelligence going, at least in the immediate future, is in the
mhm.
ability to provide this kind of assistance, right? So right
Right.
now, if I wanted to, or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I wanted to come up with a new set of assessment items, I would go ask a colleague, hey, help me write some items. And they would think and they would write some items. But now I can just have these systems write a whole bunch of them. And some of them might not be very good. And that's okay. Just like my assistant might write some that aren't very
Mhm,
good, right? The person working with me. I can go collect data on them, identify the ones that aren't so good, and keep
mhm,
the ones that are good. So writing assessment items is a clear place. Other places where we see this concern is about people using artificial intelligence to take assessments. So, am I going to get, sort of faked results because it's taken by an
yeah.
artificial intelligence machine? We've done
Mhm,
a lot of work in that. I don't want to talk too much about that, but we can if you want to. But we've done a lot of work in that, developing tools for detecting potential people who might be using
mhm.
artificial intelligence. The good news is, so far, in about 1.2 million people who've taken the assessments since ChatGPT was released, we haven't seen any evidence that anybody's using it to take the assessments. But there is some evidence that people are getting advice from ChatGPT about how to take assessments in general. And I can tell you, it's not very good advice. Even these systems
Oh,
don't even follow their own advice. So I would really caution people to avoid doing that, because a couple of cases we've seen where it's actually cost people real excellent career opportunities because they followed some bad advice from some of these tools.
That is so interesting. I mean, I know people go out there on, well, it used to be like just go to Google or whatever,
Hmm.
uh, you know, browser you're using to search for
Yeah.
this, how to take it, what's the right profile, or how to, not just the Hogan, but any assessment
Hmm.
for an interview or a job or anything like that, or a school even, and you're asking AI directly, one of the chat GPT equivalents, and you're seeing that the advice isn't that good. Interesting to know.
Yeah. Well, and of course, I think one of the big areas where we're seeing, probably the biggest area where we're seeing AI applications moving in is in the feedback space. So if I have a set of
Hmm.
scores, can I get feedback around those? Coaching, right? This is the career that I'm going for. That this is the set of results I have. This is my resume. Putting all that together and building a coaching plan. Again,
Right.
things that we would typically think only a human could do, these AI tools, again, have the ability to do this very rapidly, to summarize all the key pieces of information, pull it all together, and to give general recommendations. Now, I can tell you that there's no evidence at all that an AI system will build a better development plan than a typical human or a human coach or even an
Hmm.
excellent human coach. Um, but what I can tell you they can do is they can work very much like an assistant. Again, if I needed somebody, I said, "Look,
Hmm.
I've got 100 of these plans to
Yeah.
make or 50 of these plans to make." It could give me first drafts, and I could take those first drafts and go through them. And if I know these people, go through one at a time, nuance by nuance, and make tweaks and edits. But that's a lot faster than just starting every single one over from scratch. And so I think that's where we're going to see these AI tools play into this space is in the ability to sort of assist us with the core tasks we're already doing in the HR world.
Interesting. So not necessarily do it for us, but give us something to start with as a draft, and yet still have the human supervision over it to make sure we're not spewing out a hallucination, right?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that people need to understand. And
Mhm.
when we talk about the definition of AI, is that these AI tools, and this is why also it gives bad advice about how to take assessments, because you have to understand that these AI tools, what they are doing is they are not trying to seek truth. They are not
Mhm.
trying to give you the answer. That's not even their goal. Their goal, what they are trained to do, is to look at the text that you gave it or the words that you gave it. It's some latest technology where they can actually take your voice and turn it into text, but they take that information and they say, what's the most probabilistic, logical thing to say? Like, what should come next, probabilistically, from a word standpoint, if I'm having a conversation? And it just puts those words in. So, people talk about, and I'm guilty too. I say this too, oh, the machine thinks or it knows or it understands,
Yeah.
but it doesn't think or know or
Mhm.
understand in the
Mhm.
way that we talk about that with humans. It it
Mhm.
it is simply saying this as the set of words that make the most probable sense to follow based on the set of words that I've just seen. It doesn't know what those words mean. It just says this is what must go there next. And you can ask it another question and it will put those, and you can make it do really crazy things. And this is the kind of fun stuff and where people kind of, freak out about
Mhm.
AI taking over. You can make it. I've seen examples where you make it talk about the people who work at OpenAI, and it'll talk about accessing their cameras and watching the developers and watching them when they're at home and watching them on their phones, and you can make it do all those kinds of things, but
Mhm.
it's it's just trying to respond in the way that it
Right.
thinks that you, again, there's that word thinks, right? The way that
Yeah.
seems most probable.
Perhaps it tries to predict, is what you're saying. Yeah. Um, Excellent. Well, so, let me tell you a question that I get a lot with consultants, especially who are working with clients, right? And we're dealing with really sensitive data sometimes as we're doing assessments and stuff. And just the question is, how do we, as consultants or anyone doing assessment, how do we ensure data privacy when we use AI?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest questions. And when
Mhm.
ChatGPT first came out, I predicted, and this isn't an attempt to pat myself on the back or anything. I predicted
Mhm.
that they're going to have to solve this problem. They're going to have to solve it quickly
Mhm.
because the tools are too powerful. They're too useful for organizations to not have a way to secure their data to make sure it's private. Now, look. At some level, many organizations, I can tell you, our organization is guilty of using Microsoft products. Lots of organizations use
Mhm.
Microsoft products, and lots of Microsoft products include things like SharePoint. They include things that are inherently stored on the cloud, right? So a lot of organizations have a lot of information they are entrusting Microsoft to
Mhm.
secure very well, right? So in some respects, we're already in a third party sharing situation with data that we
Right.
have and sensitive information, because if you're storing it on something like SharePoint or Google Drive or Dropbox, somebody else technically has access to it. Now, look, they have all kinds of standards that they want to follow, and they have all kinds of good business reasons not to do nefarious things with that. Um, but ChatGPT or other tools like this are in a similar situation where they have a lot of interest in protecting that data. And so initially with ChatGPT, and it's still true today, if you go to that ChatGPT interface that
Mhm.
maybe people are familiar with, and you type something in there, the way I describe it is it's like going into a subway station or a train station. And that's the main hallway of the train station. So anything you type in there is going to be put up on the walls of that main hallway. And anybody can walk down that main hallway at any time and ask. If they just ask the right questions, they can get that information. And so you've got to be really careful about what you put in that main hallway. If you do that, anybody has access to it. We've advised our staff, don't do that. Don't put stuff in that main hallway. However, there are alternative. There are these sort of sub hallways, these offset hallways that can also access the main hallway, and that's through what are these APIs, these integrations,
Mhm.
and these are private. These are secure. Again, as secure as anything can be. If you look at the sort of security protocols they use, I don't ever pretend that anything that goes over the internet is totally 100% will never ever be hacked and is totally secure. I mean, I think it's impossible to
Mhm.
predict that. But these are about as secure as working with a Microsoft product or anything else. That's about as secure as you can get. And you can send private data down, access the information in the main hallway, and pull data back. And the data that goes down your little sub hallway, your little API is protected. That's the sort of the way I describe it. Nobody else has access to that
Mhm.
except you. I mean, obviously, there's still a concern that you're sharing at some level. You are, putting this data in another place where there is some risk. But there is absolutely no doubt that the privacy concern is a big one. And let me give you an example of ways that AI can be used in organizations where you have a lot of privacy concerns. This is why I knew
Mhm.
they had to come up with a fix for it.
Yeah. Let's hear
Um,
it.
so every organization has tons of policy documents, handbooks. They might have
Mhm.
procedures on all kinds of things, documentation of records of things that they've done in the past. Or there's all these archives and of things that are organized. And typically, in many organizations, sometimes they have people who work on those, organizing those, keeping track of those. They've built tools and search functions and things where you can go around and find that kind of information. Maybe the HR team has a tool and they can go find that, or there's just somebody who works there that's been there a long time that kind of knows, oh yeah, I remember there's a document, it's over here, you go here and you
Mhm.
find the thing. And it's not really a great system for keeping that information organized. And again, there's tools like SharePoint and things like that, which are really helpful. But an AI tool that has access to all that organizational information, all those documents, that you can just ask questions like, what is our company's maternity leave policy? And you can get, boom, an instant answer to that question and a direct link to the source for the answer. Right. Here's the document that I got this answer from, is incredibly powerful. I mean, that's just thinking about this in the sort of HR space, but think about in the legal space and all kinds of these other
Mhm.
places where just having instant synthesized information that gives you not only an answer to your question, but also a place that you can double check to make sure that answer isn't a hallucination. You can make sure that answer is
Right.
not just a bad probabilistic guess, but is actually correct. Incredibly powerful stuff. And I just don't see any way that your organizations are just not going to be able to
Mhm.
keep running without these tools going forward.
So I have just a real hypothetical here. I'm going to put you on the
Mhm.
spot. So let's just say I'm not even talking about Hogan necessarily. I'm just talking about in general. If you have an assessment and a report, and as a consultant, you might want to ask your AI. So, uh, is this person able to deal with? difficult situations and maintain their poise.
Mhm.
And then the AI can bring it back and say yes or no, whatever, and then point to some specific places in the assessment that would back it up, something like that. Would that be something that could be useful for an AI?
Yeah, exactly. And so we actually
Mhm.
we've got some prototypes of tools that do exactly that kind of thing,
Ooh,
which are really cool.
yeah.
Where you can take information about like a job description, right? So imagine again, if you're in HR space, you can take the job
Mhm,
description. These are the key requirements that AI tools can break that job description down into immediately the KSAs.
mhm,
What are the key
mhm,
skills, abilities, the knowledge that's needed to perform well in that job, right? Boom, just break that down real quickly for you. Then it can identify again with the tool that we have because it's connected with all of our data at Hogan. It's connected with our Hogan database and all of our performance data and all of these kinds of other pieces of information. This tool can then say these are the critical Hogan scales that are relevant for those KSAs.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
That's what
and
the
that's
the consultant needs to know or whoever's looking at it. Yes, like
exactly. Yeah.
mm, mm, mhm,
Yeah, and that's just with the job description, right? So this tool can also
mhm,
take resumes, and it can filter out personal information, and it can just say, "Hey, this is the knowledge that we know this person has that matches with the job description." That right? It can do all of this stuff again, instantly with automation,
mm,
lots of resumes at a time, and then as you sort of alluded to, you can take things like your Hogan flash report or your Hogan scores,
mhm,
and it can provide
mhm,
interpretations that are specific to that job description. It says this is how this person will likely perform in that role based on the job requirements, based on their personality profile.
mhm.
And again, I want to be clear about this. The goal here is not to, go, oh, we're going to automate this entire selection
Right.
process. The goal here is to create an assistant, a tool for somebody who's involved in that process to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And that's really
Mhm,
how this works. It's just somebody else who's doing the same thing you're doing. You're evaluating resumes, you're evaluating interviews, you're evaluating their profile on a personality assessment, and you're putting all that together to decide who's the best fit for the job. This is just another entity, this AI tool that's doing the same thing. And you can compare notes. You can go, what did I see? What do I see? And you can do things like you mentioned. You can ask it other questions. Or well, how is this person going to be in a different role? How can we
yeah,
develop a leadership
mhm,
development plan for this individual? You can even challenge it on things. You can say, "Well, I saw you said this. Why did you say that?" And it will
mm,
either show you its work or it will say, "You know what? Now that I look back at it, I don't know if that's really correct. I think it's actually more like this." And again, remember, these AI tools are not meant to be, this is 100% the correct answer because the AI tool said it. It's meant to be another colleague, an assistant who's working with you. And
mhm,
sometimes they can be wrong too. And you can challenge them on it. And they would say, "Ooh, you know what? Now that I think about it." But at the same time, by having that additional perspective at very little cost, you can broaden your own horizons. You can go, "Oh, wow, I would have missed that. I wouldn't have seen that about this individual if this tool hadn't brought it to my attention."
that is fantastic. I mean, I could just see that being so useful. I mean, as you're really trying to write a report for somebody or prepare for a conversation about a selection, process with somebody, having that back and forth and analyzing the assessment results and having some I would say somebody, but
Yeah,
some a
right. That's what
tool
it
to
feels
to
like.
bounce ideas off of and look and bring up other things that you may have not have thought of. I mean, so I was going to ask you, but I'm not at this point because I was going to ask you, is it going to make us all dumber? But you're saying that as an assistant or somebody, it's just going to you still have to be the expert and know what you're doing, and you can also get some more assistance and ideas. Mhm.
Yeah, that's the way I think about it. I think eh, I'm certainly not ready, and I don't think many people are
Mhm.
ready to just hand these kind of critical decisions,
Mhm.
even building a personal development plan over to an AI tool. But I think an AI tool can really help draft these kinds of things up, can help you prepare, help you think about the way you're making those decisions, and ultimately, though, I'm of the persuasion that the human is still responsible, right? So if I make a decision to hire somebody, it doesn't matter. I don't I think I get to use, well, the AI tool recommended this person.
Mhm.
Sure, that can be one piece of information in my evaluation, but ultimately I have to evaluate all the information and I'm responsible for the decision, even if an AI tool also supported my
Mhm.
recommendation. That's not enough. Ultimately, the human has to be the person
Right.
responsible.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, legally, ethically, everything, professionally, all of
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
So, Ryan, we're going to run out of time. I want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
And that is there anything else that you want to tell us that's going on at Hogan with AI that would be interesting for us to know about or look forward to in the future? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll just add a couple of other things about this. One of the cool things about a lot of these AI tools is, they help with language compatibility because if you say, well, I want to, you can ask it a question in a different language and it responds
Mm.
in the other language, right? So,
Mhm.
so it gives you lots of flexibility in terms of, how you're evaluating people. There's other really cool things that come up all the time. So, we do a lot of focus groups, for a job. Here's a focus group for a job, and we record these meetings. We take a lot of notes on these focus groups, and synthesizing the information from the focus groups. What are the key themes? What are the key ideas? What are the key scales that are going to be relevant to performance? Being able to get again another person. I still think humans have to be involved in the final decision making about what's most important for that job, but being able to quickly synthesize that information in a way that sort of boils it down to the key themes that you as the human can then evaluate is really
Mhm.
powerful. And I think we're just going to continue to not, this is just even outside of Hogan. I think we're going to continue to see things like this. Personally, I am looking forward to the AI tool on my phone that will book flights for me,
Oh,
that will
nice.
that will say, I know exactly your preferences for time to fly and what seat you
Mhm.
want and how to and all that kind of. And I'll just say, book me a flight to this, and it will just go and do it. And
Mhm.
then I don't have to. That's the kind of thing I'm looking forward to.
Oh, me too. Speaking of, bringing up an anxiety there, yeah, trying to get all that right. Excellent. So, uh, using it in, life as well as with assessment and consulting, I just think it's really exciting to know that you have a whole team of people and well, maybe not the whole team, but you have people at Hogan working on these kinds of solutions or potentials and exploring, playing with it and creating new ways of doing things, even with the current assessment profiles.
Well, can I just say one thing about that too,
Yeah.
Joni, is that, uh, I think this is a space where you have to be careful. Like as excited as I am for artificial intelligence things,
Mm.
and I know it's going to make lots of impact on our lives, in many ways going forward. You have to be careful because we're talking about making really critical decisions about people and their
Yep.
futures, and so you have to be really careful about how these things are done. I will guarantee you. I mean, there's some new technology that just came out in the last week that makes these AI tools work so quickly that they respond faster than you could read the text back, right? I mean, it's so fast how they respond that it's going to
Mm.
make AI stuff that works in real time, right? Where it wouldn't be me standing here. It's going to be an artificial intelligence bot that's having this conversation, right? That can do those kinds of things.
Mhm.
So that kind of thing is coming and it's coming really fast. I think it's really important that people understand that that technology is going to move a lot faster than the science on the personality aspect, right? So you're
Mhm.
going to see some really cool technology in the next few months, even years, and making sure that's backed by science, like not just the science of the technology, but the science of like the assessment in the case of personality assessments is really critical. Um, and so, while we're working on this, we also want to be really careful not to rush out the door with stuff that isn't scientifically backed. And I think that's the science, or as Bob Hogan says all the time, chat GPT can't do validation. It can't do validation studies, right? You have to validate this stuff first, but I'll guarantee you we see people coming out flashing the technology well before they've got solid validation.
Now that is sage advice for consultants. Yeah, to always use evidence-based tools, right? And pay attention to the science and I guess not be um, dazzled by the tech, right?
That's right.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I guess I want to say one thing that the people in SCP should consider, and that is we do have an upcoming certification course with Hogan coming up, and that will be offered this summer. And we have lots of other opportunities to work with Hogan. And it's been great talking to you, Dr. Ryne Sherman, Chief Science Officer at Hogan Assessment Systems. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Joni. Really appreciate it.